Hello, this is Kellen from Killing for Company, and I'm here with,
I'm Alan from Let's Talk Metal.
and we are here to review the fourth full length from Finland's Havukruunu, entitled Tavastland.
So, yeah, an album I think that a lot of folks have been looking forward to this year. It's been 5 years since their last album came out, with I think just one EP in between. So, they've been a bit quiet in the past few years.
Yeah, so this is a project that I was really excited, I think, to begin 2025. This was the most sort of right front and center on my radar in terms of when I was looking forward to. I've been paying attention to this project, I would say, on a pretty consistent level over the past decade plus. They've been around for a little bit longer than that, but the first record comes out in 2014. It was very much a sort of traditional pagan black metal affair. I'm curious, Alan, how much experience do you have with Havukruunu?
A little bit. I don't know them as well as you do. I got on board a while after the second album came out and shortly before the third one. And this was just kind of a random Bandcamp discovery for me. Found the second album, was like, that's actually pretty cool. And then it was just like a couple of months later, the third one came out. So I was like, oh, good, more material. So yeah, I'm familiar with both of those albums, enjoyed them both. So yeah, I was also really excited to see that they had a new one coming out here. It was announced kind of at the tail end of 2024, and so it definitely got onto my list of things to look out for once we got into 2025. But yeah, you followed them longer and know them more in depth than I do.
This is one of those bands where, for me, I should say both Alan and I, our Finnish is a little bit rough, well, just to say the least. So, forgive us in terms of the pronunciation here, but Kelle Surut Soi, the second full length that came out in 2017, I that record was for me the high point in the catalog. Well, the first record was solid. I really enjoyed the second full length. I felt it was like a better sort of expression of what the first record kind of established, but was very much in like a traditional pagan black metal sort of affair.
Mhm.
The third full length that came out, I thought was a stylistic sort of change for them. Um, and while I don't think it was necessarily like it was still a solid release, got a lot of attention here.
Yep.
Those first three records, all on Knock and Mock, I think, productions
Yep.
or records. So this is the first one with Svart. And I was excited to see them move to, I would imagine, a slightly larger label.
Hmm.
Um, but I was kind of curious after the third full length what, we had in store. Did you notice a change between the second and third album at all, Alan?
There's a little bit, I think it's a pretty clear progression between those two. I think a lot of folks would agree with you that the second is a lot of people's favorites. And then the third album, still good. It had a very positive reception, as you mentioned. But yeah, I don't think it really, necessarily exceeded the second album for most folks. It may have felt like, okay, they've changed some things here. It's neither better nor worse. It's, kind of maybe a lateral step. But yeah, it felt a little different, but not in bad ways. Just, that the band was, again, sort of continuing to evolve their sound a little bit, getting a little tighter as a unit. So still enjoyed the third album quite a bit as well.
So before we kind of get into this, the fourth release here, I think the band is, composed of Stefan. To me, is the primary songwriter here.
Hmm.
He's done everything vocals. I think he's the lead guitarist or major songwriting force on this band. Played the drums early on, but that they're accompanied by Humo on bass. Please forgive me here on the drumming. Costa Janin and Henka is the second guitarist here. So fully rounds out the band. I do think though Stefan sort of is the primary driving force, the consistent member throughout the years.
Hmm. Yeah, they have
Um,
had a lineup change here, a lineup change there over the course of the albums.
and here we get into the fourth record. Um, we've kind of touched on this sort of pagan Finnish black metal thing. Um, I do believe, especially as we get to the third, now fourth record, there might be a little bit more sort of qualification required to talk about the sound of this band. So, just curious, like, what would be your thoughts, Alan, in terms of how you would describe the overall sound before we get into the individual tracks here, especially once we get into this fourth release?
Yeah, with this album, Tavastland, I think something they've really dialed up in this case is the epic factor. I think that you could describe this as epic pagan black metal. And it would sort of be like in that sequence in terms of importance, that it's a very epic sounding album, very pagan in its themes, and there's, still black metal roots, but I feel like that part maybe is downplayed a little bit compared to the previous efforts in favor of really bolstering this, just sort of grand atmosphere that really comes across in all the tracks, more so than this time than on the previous albums. How would you categorize it, Kellen?
I would agree with that, but I would also, here's where I feel the need to step away from it slightly, is if someone comes to this thinking you're going to find summoning, or right, like that's not
Hmm.
what we're talking about here.
Not at all. No.
Like I think very to Alan's point, there is a kind of a epic traditional guitar style at play.
Yes, very much so.
So they venture into this like initially very early on in their sound, there was much more of like a traditional black metal sort of approach
Hmm.
with the riffing style. Um, but once we got here, especially on Tavastland, there's moments of this record, they're purely, I think, yeah, sure, there's like that tremolo sort of blast beat stuff that if you are accustomed to the genre, like whatever, that's standard fare.
Yeah,
But there's some the soloing here feels like it's pulling from traditional heavy metal. There's
very
these sort
much
of
so. Yeah.
galloping riffs. To Alan's point, the sort of melodic component to this, or the way it builds up momentum and grandeur,
Mhm.
feels like that is 100% pulling from an epic heavy metal like background.
Hmm.
Um, so if someone's thinking like, oh, this is epic black metal, like Summoning, or a more modern example like Caladan Brood, I'd want to steer you away from that.
Yeah, it's not that kind of vibe whatsoever. You're right. There, if anything, I think it's got more of a Hellenic black metal, with like more recent Rotting Christ or Varathron in terms of its kind of world building aspects. But with this, again, very big sense, this is something that's supposed to be seen like a Greek tragedy, one of these, big, huge productions. That, yeah, it's not, the kind of, quiet, mysterious, very atmospheric type of epic that a summoning or a Caladan Brood would do. This is like 80,000, marching, out to revolt against the Catholic Church, which that's what the Tavastland story is about. It's based on a historical event from this region of Finland where the locals had kind of rejected the Catholic Church and revolted against that, kind of was re-embracing their pagan roots, which is kind of keeping with Havukruunu's overall ethos, I think.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into the track listing here. We can go by this track by track, but what I thought we would do is just kind of pick some standout moments, things that probably demonstrate sort of our favorite sort of tracks on this release from this time Tavastland, and what you think best sort of demonstrates the strength of the overall, this record. So, are there moments where they kind of turned your head, or you thought, or the first thing you'd recommend in terms of nailing down the sound of this record?
Oh yeah, there are, and there are a lot of them. In the album opener, Kuomelatan Laluhenki, there's several. It starts off, again, in this kind of very big, starting to go for almost, sort of the world building aspects. Before you even get to like the main verse, there's just a couple of measures, a very short part, where there's this little symphonic flourish, just like I'm not sure if it's flutes, some kind of woodwind, but there's just like this little, just very kind of airy, swirly symphonic moment. And for like, just that moment, you're like, wait a second, that sounds like something you'd hear like almost on an Avantasia record, some kind of, one of these, like Disney power metal. It's just this short moment. It doesn't last long, and they don't do it again on the album. But it really does help kind of just elevate and keep building up that momentum until the first verse comes crashing in. And then you get towards the end of the song develops really nicely. Again, it's one of these very big, grand kind of themed songs. And as it's kind of, moving through its paces towards the end, there's a very sudden, sharp thunderclap. And it's not like it's super loud. It's not super deep. It's not super long. It's just one of these kind of quick, kaboom. But it catches you off guard. You don't expect it coming. And it just gives you this quick, short snap where it's like, hey, you do not know what's going to happen in the next moment on this album. I think both those moments from the beginning of the song and the end of the song, it really is telling you up front that we're not ever going to just settle in on this album. There's going to be something waiting to surprise you at any given moment. That almost all of these songs have something in them where they take a sudden twist or add a different element. Then again, they don't reuse the same tricks. Every song kind of has its own little thing, but it really helps give every song some different character, identity, and really keeps you engaged as a listener. At least it did for me.
So that's a great setup to the second track here. We'll just kind of follow through this chronologically. So Youngsten
Youngsten.
Yes. All right. That is very so if you got into the first track, I actually think that's a little bit more on the like a traditional, I kind of expected that from Havukruunu. The second track by comparison is much more of a slow burn.
Yes.
And to Alan's point about sort of this epic sort of element to the record, this is a great sort of early sort of turn for me, where something they were developing on the third release, I thought, was a little bit more of this traditional heavy metal character built into the black metal context. I think that the third record is for me a transition record. Now listening to Tavastland, you would agree with that?
I would agree with that. The only thing I would qualify there, just so folks don't, again, like you said before, kind of steer in the wrong direction. When we're saying they're incorporating like a cleaner, almost traditional metal element, it's not to the extent of someone like Moonlight Sorcery. Where Moonlight Sorcery really does feel almost at times like a symphonic power metal band with blackened vocals. That's not what's happening here. The lead work and stuff is very clean. There's no down tuning or anything or distortion trying to make it sound cult or raw or anything. The lead work and such, very clean to Kellen's point. But I don't want anyone to take that and be like, oh, this must be like Moonlight Sorcery. That's not a great comparison, really.
So this is my like a moment to highlight here. This like song sort of patiently builds, slowly ascends, and we get to the solo here. It 100% sounds to me like it is pulled from a different sort of genre altogether.
Yeah.
It is a glimpse into a different part of sort of heavy metal's sort of envelope in history. And they do it in a way that feels like I look forward to it when we arrive here at this. And it's another thing that I'll kind of come back to later on as we talk about this album, is the solos do a great job of walking a line between sort of a certain kind of traditional heavy metal character that's well incorporated within a black metal context. I know that I kind of sounds like we are broken record here talking about the same sort of thing, but it's probably the overarching character to Tavastland, and probably even my opinion why it's some success.
Yeah, it's a big part of the album for sure. And again, to be clear with everyone, they're not trying to go into like full on Ingwe mode or anything like that. It's not that kind of hot shot soloing. It's just it sounds like Kellen said, like it's been lifted from a more traditional heavy metal or power metal kind of structure and sound, and put into the middle of this pagan black metal record. But it works. They make it work incredibly well. It does not feel out of place. It just feels like a very unique combination, something that you wouldn't hear many other bands even attempt to do. So, moving on to track three, Havukruunu Ja Torvanvaro. I think on this track and also the fourth track, which is the title track, Tavastland, both of these songs open with the band more in their sort of icy black metal mode. They're faster, fiercer sounding, and I think to an extent that's what people expect based on the second and third Havukruunu albums. These were the parts where I feel like, okay, this sounds more akin to what I've heard Havukruunu do in the past. But neither of these songs stay in that mode. Both of them actually incorporate a lot of folk elements by the middle of the songs. They're, again, changing directions, bringing in extra vocalists, extra instrumentation, and they really bring in more of that folk and pagan vibe very, very nicely on both those songs. And then, Kellen, I know you're interested in talking about the next track as well, which five is Koloman Oma.
Yeah, so Coleman Oma, this track begins with probably the most dramatic sort of acoustic moment on the entire record.
Hmm.
So we get an acoustic guitar that begins this, and then it sort of launches into sort of a slow build, and you don't really know where this is going.
Hmm.
They reintroduce the acoustic again, and it is 100% sort of like, an archer, reaching back into the quiver and launching this solo that comes. So
Hmm.
it's this perfectly timed, blistering solo. Underneath it, we get a blast beat. So there's this incredible sense of like dramatic momentum that arrives in the middle of this track.
Hmm.
Moves from that back into like a super fast black metal sort of riff where we get the blast beat ends, double bass carries, and then they return to it again. So we get another sort of solo and
Yep.
the blast beat sitting underneath it. It sort of slowly devolves. The drummer makes the transition and moves towards double bass. The solo continues, and the song just sort of slowly descends. The back 3 minutes of this track are probably one of the more sort of amazing songwriting structure sort of
Hmm.
moments on the entire record.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where like as much as I have enjoyed the first four tracks on this, I probably went back and replayed those few minutes several times just because it was just the level of drama and anticipation that it gave you. When you get that sort of acoustic that sort of resets the table, only to
Hmm.
be sort of flung into space.
Yep.
It's a really cool moment on this record.
Yeah. And the first half of that song sets it up perfectly too. Because, like you said, it builds kind of slowly. The first half of it's got a quieter, almost more of a, a Viking metal kind of vibe, just, with a little deeper chanting. And it gets that kind of, dun, 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 just very, a deeper, slower build. Not doing the big, higher, chorale kind of sound that we've heard on some of the other songs. This song starts off more subtle and builds up and then breaks that way. And yeah, it's really brilliantly put together.
So it's a major highlight from that, and it goes directly into track number 6, right? There's not a lot of moment of breathing room.
Nope.
So Unisaka Vija.
I know some of these titles, but you're on your own on this one.
um, so yeah, track number 6 here. This probably is a great moment to talk about like the level of growth in terms of musicianship here and the inclusion of additional members. So Costa Janin, the drumming here is super tight. I just kind of like if there was anyone who was thinking this was sort of a raw black metal affair, um, the level of execution that this track opens with, just how dense the blast beat is and how sort of in sync or how locked together the band sounds for the opening sort of minute and a half of this track. It's just one of those, it's a sign that this band has been around for a little bit and they're 100% together on this album. So it's super fast to open this, and then it like they transition into one of the more sort of moody and sort of introspective sort of it almost sounds like there's a, I don't know if it's a mellotron or something in the background. There's a weird sort of key presence in the middle of this where it just changes gears drastically, going from incredibly fast, probably one of the more, punishing moments in the entire record, to this very sort of dreamy, sort of searching section on this album. And we get another gear change. So it moves from that into we get like a the same sort of point that Alan and I've been talking about, a little bit more of like a traditional sort of um, galloping riff and solo. And then we return the album, or this track closes with that blast beat again. So they do these three sort of turns over the course of this track. And I think in sort of demonstrating their mastery of how do we incorporate different elements or different kind of songwriting sort of techniques from this band at this point in their career, this is a great track to sort of highlight different sort of personality elements within the band.
We get to the last two tracks on the album, Kun veri sekoittuu lumen. This is another one that has lots of big epic moments. You get to the end of it, and yeah, just the epic intensity is starting to go off the scale. It feels like you're listening to this, like Morricone's score, from an old spaghetti western or something. I mean, it really has that level of character and just edge of your seat, epic, waiting for this thing to finally end. It just builds and builds and builds and we're not done yet. It does like 5 levels of that final build, and you get to the end of it, and it really is just one moment, just like, huh, can I catch my breath for a second?
Right.
And I think smartly when they head into the closer, they do back. The beginning of that song, backs off for a couple of minutes. It gives you a chance to catch up and reset. But you get to the end of that song, and once again, they develop it with a really majestic feel, but in a different way. The last couple of minutes, as they head into the fade out, is more this kind of somber, almost like Gregorian kind of monk chanting, and they just kind of let it gradually drift at the end of the song, which is a really nice end off. At the end of track 7, it feels like this is where the album should have ended. But then you work your way through that last track, and you're like, yeah, no, actually, I like this ending better. It's almost like the album had 2 great ending points, and they figured out, yeah, let's do the big one first, kind of blow everyone's socks off, and then let's kind of take the classier, more humble and somber way to actually fade out. I think it was again kind of a really good decision in terms of the track sequencing and how to come to a close for this album.
Yeah, I would. So there's probably 2 notes I want to
Hmm.
make on this point. One, I 100% agree with you, Alan, in the sense that if they had done like made this and added another track to the record that was just sort of an outro um, with the sort of choral chanting, sort of singing thing, I would have felt like, do we really need it?
No.
But I think the fact that they include it and this just sort of slowly descends, and evaporates at the end is a
Hmm.
great way. This, it's really almost 2 songs, right? The
Yep.
first 6 or 7 minutes of it is another sort of classic Havukruunu track, and the closing sort of few minutes are this sort of like it dissipates, and then
Hmm.
you're gone, you're done
Yeah.
with the record.
The tragedy is over. The
Yeah.
actors are leaving the stage. The lights are going down, and the Greek chorus that's over here to the side, that's been bearing witness to this phenomenal sequence of events. They're just here to help you kind of quietly transition back out of that ethereal world they've created and into your own world.
So the second point, all their lyrics, all their song titles, and Al and I have been poetically stumbling through this evening, uh, are it's all in Finnish, and the album begins, and this closing track also includes sort of some narration. It sounds like a
Mhm.
sample of something in Finnish.
Yep.
I don't know what they're talking about or what's going on
I
there,
checked
but
all the I checked all the promo notes that we received with it, and there's no mention of if that is a sample from something in particular, or it could just be somebody in the studio saying something that's probably profound and cool, but we can't understand it because it didn't come with a translation. But
But
yes,
I
they do it
think
at the beginning of the first track, and you're right. Then they do it again at the beginning here of the final track.
And so to just sort of reiterate this point about a well-constructed record that sort of begins, it's the only time you get it on the record.
Yep.
So the fact that they were sort of cognizant of, if we're going to include this, it feels even though Alan and I have no idea what they're saying, it, at least at some level feels like there's intention behind the inclusion here, and it's
Mhm.
trying to delve into some sort of coherency between the beginning and the ending of the record.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just another good example of them using, these different elements. And that element, they use it twice. But again, it's pretty short both times. It's not like this long 5 minute speech or anything. It's, I don't know, 30, 45 seconds worth of, a little spoken bit. And they only use it once at the beginning and once at the end. And there's just all those kind of little, they're not Easter eggs. I mean, they're put there very intentionally. You're going to notice them, but every song has things like that. I think it's track 7 has a moment where they actually have like a more spacey kind of synthesizer bit in the song. And at first you're kind of like, what is that? There's nothing on that. This is different. This hasn't been on this album before. And again, it sounds like an element lifted from some other style, but it's just there for a minute or two. It actually blends into the song really nicely. And you're just like, huh, that's crazy that, once again, there's yet another kind of little surprise they've worked into that song that you don't see it coming whatsoever, but you really appreciate it when you finally notice it's there.
So, with all our sort of gushing praise over this, anything that you kind of were left thinking that there's room for improvement, or it's sort of something that you sort of wish they had changed for the record?
Not really. I am really blown away by this album. I feel like, again, I've enjoyed Havukruunu's last two albums, the previous two. I feel like they have really upped their game on this one. I think this is on another level. And no, there's nothing that stands as like, well, it's all great except for, well, there's this one niggling thing. Um, Even as much of a nitpicker as I can be, I can't find much on this album that's bothering me whatsoever. Is there anything that stands out to you? Again, Kellen, you're more familiar with their back catalog and stuff. So is there anything that you've noticed that you're thinking is like, this one part is maybe seems a little off somehow?
No, like I think the thing that I will keep an eye out on for in the future though is their transitions. Nothing felt so dramatically abrupt, like to the point where I was confused on this record. Um, but I do think it's really interesting. Like one, it is a giant step, I think, in terms of musical growth and sort of mastery relative to their third release.
Agreed.
Like whatever they got started there, and they were sort of, we don't want to be complacent being just another sort of pagan black metal band.
Hmm.
Like that, if that's all that you're into, go check out their second album. If you
Yeah.
want a band who's trying to push for new creative sort of territory, this 100% fits the bill. Um, and the fact that there's enough little sort of like interesting sort of wrinkles to this point. Like Alan and I have not got into, all the small details that are almost passing, right? That sort of you just referred to that sort of like Moog synth that closes sort of track 7.
Hmm.
On Tavastland, the close, like for example, there it feels to me on the sort of the fourth track, I think there's some cellos going on in the back end of that track. That sounds like there's some strings that arrive at the end.
Hmm.
And I almost felt like there was another minute or two that they could have, built on that.
Hmm.
So while this record, I think, is I would say, arguably the best release in their catalog thus far. I'm happy it came on a larger record with more distribution. So
Hmm.
more people are going to get their hands on it and hopefully hear about this band. They are coming to the States to play at MDF
Yep.
here this year. So a chance to play for an American audience. So
Very cool.
hey, that's cool. But yeah, like a big step forward, an amazing record here. One of the first real landmark success stories for me in 2025.
Mhm.
And I think if you've kind of gathered Alan and I's, you know, summarize our thoughts, as we're very much pleased with this effort. It's a great record.
I think we like it. Yeah. One last point to go along with what you just said there, where it does at times feel like they probably could have taken some elements and lengthened them on this album, but they resisted that temptation. Almost every song on here sticks around the 5 to 6 minute mark. The opener is barely over 7 minutes, but again, that one has some introductory parts. It's a very short feeling 7 minute track.
Right, right.
The only other track that gets over the 7 minute mark is the closer. So yeah, all of this that we're talking about with them doing these different elements and multiple parts to songs, they're keeping it in a 5 to 6 minute time frame, which I think is another really smart choice. They're not making this an album where every track is 11 or 12 minutes to get through, which even for good songs can wear on you. These songs are relatively compact and have a lot going on in them, but because they don't drag them out too long, it leaves you wanting more. You really do want to go back and play this again and again. It's not like you get to the end of the album, it's like, okay, that was a journey, and you have to reset. The song lengths work incredibly well on this one. They did not, give into that temptation to be like, oh, we're making something epic. It should be 13 minutes per track. I'm really glad they didn't do that.
And I think if we were, Alan and I, for the sake of trying to make this review a little bit more concise, uh, all of these tracks, I think to your point, have individual characteristics to them.
Yes. Hmm. Every
Um,
song stands out. Every song is unique. Every song has multiple things in it that are going to help you remember that song, independent from all the songs around it.
so there's a consistent through line, but compositionally, they all have some unique element built in, which I think makes it very easy for me as when I go back and revisit it. It's like, oh, this song has this cool part, or this song has this
Hmm.
key solo, or this song has this interesting instrumentation in it. Like the fact
Yep.
that you can go through that on a 50-minute listen, I think proves how well their songwriting has evolved through the years.
Agree 100%. Yep. So at the end of the day, what do you think, Kellen? Their best A plus,
Y-
B minus, 7 out of
Yeah,
10? How do you want to summarize
yeah.
this
I
one?
mean, a high, high, high recommendation. It is my favorite, black metal listen so far in 2025, um, and probably my favorite record so far in 2025.
Hmm.
Uh, I do think it is the best, and I would say this, their most unique offering as a band. Well, the second
Hmm.
release, the second album, I think probably is going to be a little more of a like a black metal truists sort of choice.
Fair.
Um, Havukruunu is trying to do something unique, and this has always been sort of at the precipice of their sound is the guitar work and Stefan's sort of interesting guitar ideas. This is, you know, him writing in a way that feels a bit more free, and offering unique personality and contribution to the genre that I feel is unique to the band. So if that kind of speaks to you and you want something that's a little bit less predictable as a black metal or pagan black metal listen, I absolutely recommend this.
Yeah. If you want to, yeah, a great pagan black metal record, but one that has, an extreme sense of epic adventure about it, this is the album to check out. For final, yeah, thoughts and gushes from me on this one, most new albums when they come out and I'm thinking about reviewing them, I'll play them somewhere between half a dozen and maybe 10 times. Enough to get a really good feel, see how it holds up, for a week or two. This album I have already played somewhere between 2 dozen and 3 dozen times, and it doesn't feel the least bit old. I could put it on right now and enjoy every minute of it and probably notice little things that I haven't completely picked up on before. I will say right out of the gate, this, the much too early to call end of year list. If something comes out that's better than this year, it's going to be a great year. I am predicting right now that this will be my favorite album of the entire year, 2025. And beyond that, it is one of my favorite albums that has come out probably in the past 2 calendar years. I think this album already blows away any album that I heard from 2024. I really can't emphasize. I think this is a brilliant album. I think it is amazingly engaging. And it's already proven to me that it's going to hold up to a lot of spins. I do not give brand new releases a 10 out of 10 type score. I think you have to earn that kind of score by holding up over the long term. Yeah, and not just a month or two of listens, but 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, do you still like it that much? But this is one of the first albums the first album in 2 years that I predict I'll be calling an A+ album when we get a couple of years down the road. I really do think it's that good. Well, I guess we're done.
Okay,
So
so
with that, thanks to everybody for checking out this review. Keep an eye on Heavy Metallurgy for more reviews in the future. There's a ton of great stuff coming out here in late February and early March. It's going to be easy to miss some things. And I can say from other previews, there's a lot of really good quality stuff coming out too. So please keep an eye on the stuff that we are reviewing. Check them out so that you know how to spend your money wisely and pick up the albums that you think are absolute must-haves. Kellen, anything you'd like to say as we get ready to sign out here?
yeah, so call to arms time, right? Speaking of bands and ones that I've been highly anticipating here for 2025, it's the Italian traditional heavy metal band Vulture's Vengeance. They
Wow.
come out with their second full length on High Roller. This is a band that I've been wanting more from. They've been silent for now 6 years. So to get a full length from them, it's somewhere for me. Dark Quarter, is the first place I'll go. But Early Fates Warning, a strange vocalist. So Sirathungal, whatever you want to go with there. I see you there, flinching, Professor. But yeah, that's one I'm super excited for. And that's coming up here in February. So just like this Havukruunu release this month, another great release I'm anticipating coming out this early 2025.
I've seen a dying world, no more confines, gospel mankind freedom, there's no more.
Sounds good. All right. Well, with that, again, everybody keep an eye on Heavy Metallurgy for more album reviews, album clubs on Wednesday with Kellen, and Friday night live streams with myself and Marty. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, everybody, take care and stay tuned.
Your life